The rain had been relentless all afternoon, turning the streets into streams and painting the city in dull, reflective silver. Inside the small animal shelter on the corner of a quiet suburban block, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, casting an artificial warmth over rows of kennels. Volunteers moved quickly, checking water bowls, filling food dishes, and scribbling notes on clipboards. To them, it was just another slow Tuesday, another day of trying to find homes for animals most people had overlooked or abandoned. And then she appeared. A little girl, maybe 8 or 9, wearing a hoodie too big for her small frame and sneakers that had lost their laces somewhere along the way. Her hair was damp and tangled, sticking to her forehead in clumps. Her jeans were stained at the knees, darkened with mud from the puddles outside. She moved with quiet purpose, head tilted down, hands clasped together, avoiding the gaze of anyone who might stop her. At first, the volunteers didn't notice her. Shelters were full of kids who pressed their faces against the metal bars of kennels, eyes wide at the animals inside. Most left after a few minutes, tugged along by parents who thought a cute puppy might be fun for a weekend. But there was something different about this girl. She didn't bounce excitedly from cage to cage. She didn't giggle. She didn't hesitate. She walked straight to the last kennel in the far corner of the room, the one most volunteers avoided. Inside that kennel lay a dog so thin that his ribs protruded like shadows under stretched skin. His eyes were cloudy, dull, heavy with fatigue, and he trembled slightly, curling his body around himself. A faded tag hung loosely from his collar, marked with the words medical hold, a quiet warning that this dog required care beyond the shelter's limited resources. Volunteers often avoided these animals, the ones that needed more than a home, the ones that required time, patience, and money they rarely had. The little girl stopped in front of him, kneeling to meet his gaze. She didn't speak at first. She just looked. Her small hands pressed against the cold metal bars, and the dog, for the first time all day, lifted his head. There was a flicker of recognition, or perhaps hope, in his tired eyes. "Hi," the girl whispered, barely audible. "Hi, I'm gonna take care of you." The clerk behind the counter, a woman named Lisa, raised an eyebrow. She was tired, worn thin from years of heartbreaks, returned animals, families that gave up too easily, volunteers who quit midweek. She had heard countless promises before. "Honey," she said carefully, "you know this dog is complicated. He's been returned twice. He needs a lot of care, and the adoption fee is—" Her voice trailed off as if she feared the number would scare the girl away. The girl swallowed hard. Her voice was soft, trembling, yet steady with determination. Can I pay later for him?" The room seemed to stop. Even the buzzing fluorescent lights seemed to hush. Volunteers froze mid-motion. Lisa blinked twice, unsure if she'd heard correctly. "Pay later?" she asked, her voice tinged with confusion. "I'm sorry, sweetie, we can't hold adoptions without payment." The girl nodded slowly. Her hands tightened around the kennel bars. "I'll pay, I promise, I need him now. I'll bring the money." Lisa was used to children begging for a puppy or a kitten, but something about the way this girl looked at the dog made her stomach twist. It wasn't desire, it was urgency. It wasn't want, it was necessity. She glanced at the other volunteers who had stopped their tasks, watching silently. One shook her head in disbelief, another's eyes glistened. The little girl finally took a deep breath, her voice breaking slightly. I can't wait. He needs me and I need him." Lisa hesitated, caught between policy and something else she couldn't name. She glanced at the dog, lying still, seemingly exhausted from a life that had already given him too many hard days. His ears twitched, and he shifted slightly closer to the bars, as if understanding the girl's words. "Why?" Lisa asked finally. She needed to know why a child would risk everything to take responsibility for an animal she barely knew, especially one no one else wanted. The girl looked down, fidgeting with the drawstring of her hoodie. It's my dad," she said quietly. He doesn't get out of bed much anymore. He doesn't laugh. He barely talks. And my mom, she left a long time ago. And I think he needs someone to care for, you know. Someone that loves him no matter what. I read that dogs can do that. That maybe if we have a dog, he'll smile again. Silence fell. The volunteers exchanged glances, unsure if they had heard a child speak with such raw understanding. Lisa's throat tightened. She swallowed, trying to keep her voice steady. Honey, you realize he's not easy. He's been sick. He's been abandoned. Some people couldn't handle him. I can, the girl said simply. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, held a weight far beyond her years. I can. I'll take care of him. I'll make sure he's okay. The dog lifted his head again, letting out a soft, hoarse whine. He stepped closer to the bars, nose nudging toward her fingers. His body, frail and trembling, seemed to gather courage just from her presence. Lisa looked at the clock. The shelter closed in 30 minutes. Rules were rules. Policies were policies. But somewhere deep in her chest, she felt the tug of something stronger than paperwork or liability forms. It was the undeniable truth that sometimes life gave people, or animals, a second chance through the smallest, bravest acts. And there, in the corner of a small animal shelter on a rainy Tuesday, a little girl and a dog who had almost given up on the world locked eyes. In that instant, nothing else mattered. The girl tilted her head and asked again, barely a whisper, "Can I pay later?" The room held its breath. The dog had been returned twice before, and each time the shelter staff had felt the weight of disappointment settle over them. His first owner had called him too sickly after a vet visit that required daily medications. The second had claimed he was too much work, abandoning him at the shelter after 3 weeks. Volunteers whispered about him behind closed doors, saying he wouldn't make it, that maybe he was meant to be put down. His eyes, now clouded and weary, seemed to understand every whispered word, but he no longer reacted with fear. He had learned the world could hurt, and yet here was a small girl, kneeling before him, looking not with pity but with purpose. The little girl crouched lower, letting her hoodie slip off her shoulders slightly. She stretched out her hand through the bars, and the dog sniffed, hesitant at first, then nuzzled it softly. His ribcage rose and fell with effort, weak from malnourishment but still alive. His tail, a thin thread of fur and bone, twitched. It was the first sign of hope he had shown in weeks. He's scared," Lisa said quietly, stepping closer. She kept her voice gentle, careful not to startle either of them. "He's been through a lot. He's complicated. We call him the returned dog. Nobody wants him because he's sick and—" The girl shook her head. "No," she interrupted softly but firmly. "I want him. I don't care if he's sick. I'll take care of him. I don't have much money, but I'll do what I have to." Lisa paused, studying her. Something in the girl's eyes made her chest tighten. There was no exaggeration, no act, just pure determination. She had seen adults with half the willpower crumble before this dog, and yet this child, small and soaked from the rain, was asking to save him. The dog shifted slightly, lifting his paw to press against the metal. It was a weak gesture, almost invisible to anyone who didn't know how to read these subtle signs. But the girl noticed. She whispered, "It's okay, I'm not going anywhere. I won't leave you." Volunteers glanced at each other, silent. One of them, a young man named Marcus, wiped his hands on his jeans and muttered, "I don't think I've ever seen someone connect with him like that before." The girl's story began to unfold, though she spoke slowly, as if choosing each word carefully. "My dad, he's not like other dads. He doesn't get out of bed much. He stopped laughing a long time ago. Sometimes he forgets to eat. Doctors say he has depression, bad depression. I thought if he had a dog, maybe he'd wake up again. I read it online that dogs can do that they help people who are sad." Lisa's heart clenched. She had seen depression in people, sure, but the raw honesty from a child, the kind of hope pinned on something as fragile as a returned dog, struck her like lightning. "And I've been saving," the girl added, pulling a small, crumpled pouch from her hoodie pocket. Coins spilled onto the floor, pennies, nickels, dimes, enough to cover maybe a quarter of the fee. She had been walking neighbors' dogs, delivering newspapers, skipping snacks, doing whatever she could. Each coin carried sweat, effort, and hope. The dog whined softly, a sound that seemed almost human in its pleading. He inched closer, letting his head rest against her knees. His eyes, cloudy and almost empty, seemed to fill with something new, trust. Lisa knelt down, resting her hands on the counter. "Honey, I don't know if you understand what you're asking for," she said, voice trembling. "This dog, he's sick. He needs medicine, special food, care. He might not make it easy for you. He's been returned because people gave up." The girl's lips trembled, but her eyes did not waver. "I don't care. I'll take care of him, I can. I'll learn, I'll do whatever he needs. I just want him to know someone loves him." Marcus, the young volunteer, leaned closer. "She's serious," he said under his breath. "She's not just another kid wanting a cute dog. Look at her, she's ready." Lisa turned to him but didn't answer. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her chest. The shelter had rules, rules designed to protect animals, to protect themselves from heartbreak, to keep operations running smoothly. But looking at the girl and the dog, she knew that rules sometimes needed to bend for moments like this. Moments when hope and desperation collided. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, light mist drifting along the windows. The sound of it seemed distant, almost dreamlike, as if the world itself had paused to witness this connection. The girl whispered the name she had already chosen, Buddy. Her voice was small but certain. "I'm going to call you Buddy." Buddy lifted his head higher, eyes blinking slowly. It was a small sign, almost imperceptible, but it was enough. Enough to make the volunteers pause. Enough to make Lisa's heart ache with a mixture of fear and hope. Can I hold him?" the girl asked. The shelter had strict rules about handling animals without supervision, but Lisa couldn't stop herself. She opened the kennel carefully and Buddy stepped forward hesitantly, legs unsteady. The girl knelt, holding him close, wrapping her arms around his thin body. He rested his head on her shoulder, letting out a shuddering sigh. "I'll take care of you," she whispered again. "I promise." And in that moment, the shelter was silent except for the soft sound of Buddy's breathing and the faint rustle of coins on the counter. No one spoke. No one moved. The weight of the scene hung in the room like a tangible thing. Hope, desperation, and fragile trust intertwined in one tiny, trembling frame. Lisa swallowed hard. She knew she couldn't authorize the adoption without payment, but she also knew she couldn't turn the girl away. Not now. Not after seeing how much this child and this dog needed each other. Then just as she was about to speak, Buddy let out a soft bark, weak but urgent. His eyes, cloudy yet sharp in that instant, locked onto Lisa. It was almost as if he were saying, "You can't stop this. She's mine." The girl tightened her hold, shivering not from cold but from emotion. "See, he knows," she said, voice breaking. "He knows I'm his." Lisa stepped back, uncertainty battling compassion. The rest of the volunteers had gathered around now, watching silently. No one dared speak, afraid to shatter the fragile bubble of trust and hope that had formed in this corner of the shelter. And then the clock on the wall ticked, a harsh reminder that the shelter would close in less than an hour. Papers needed signing. Rules needed following. Policies demanded adherence. Yet no one could move. The room felt suspended, caught between reality and the almost magical moment unfolding. Lisa took a deep breath, bracing herself. She had a decision to make, a decision that could change two lives forever. Outside, the rain continued to fall, like a quiet witness to what was happening inside. Buddy let out another bark, soft, insistent, as if urging them all forward. And the little girl whispered, clutching him tighter, "Please, don't let anything take him away." The room seemed to hold its breath again, waiting for an answer that would determine the course of both their lives. And just like that, everyone knew, nothing about this day, or this little girl and her returned dog would ever be ordinary again. The little girl held Buddy close, his frail body trembling against hers. The shelter had fallen quiet, every volunteer and staff member frozen, caught between policy and the raw, unfiltered human emotion playing out before them. Lisa finally stepped closer, crouching to meet the girl's gaze. "Honey," she said gently, "why is this so important? Why him?" The girl took a deep breath, her tiny chest rising and falling with determination. She blinked rapidly as if gathering courage from the very air around her. Then her voice broke the silence, soft but unwavering. "It's my dad," she said. The words hung in the air, weighty and fragile at the same time. He doesn't get out of bed much anymore. He barely eats. Sometimes he forgets to shower. He doesn't laugh. He doesn't talk. Doctors call it severe depression, but I know it's more than that. He's like he's invisible to the world." Lisa's hand instinctively went to her mouth. She had seen adults struggle with depression, but hearing a child describe it in such intimate, haunting detail felt like a punch to the gut. Volunteers exchanged glances, eyes wide. This wasn't just a story about a dog. This was about a child trying to save a father's life. The girl's hands tightened around Buddy's thin body. "I've tried everything. I bring him breakfast. I tell him jokes. I try to make him smile. Sometimes it works for a moment, but then he just goes back to being quiet. And I read that dogs, they help people who are like that. That having someone who loves them no matter what could make him wake up again, maybe make him want to live again." A soft sigh escaped Lisa. She looked at Buddy, who now rested his head on the girl's shoulder, ears twitching as if he understood every word. The dog had seen humans give up on him, and yet here he was, placed in the arms of someone willing to fight for a life that had grown heavy with sadness. The girl dug into her hoodie pocket and pulled out the small pouch of coins. "I've been saving," she whispered. "For months. I walk neighbors' dogs, I do chores, I skip snacks. I even gave up my birthday money because I need him to come home. I don't have enough right now, but I promise I'll pay every penny." Marcus, the volunteer, crouched nearby, eyes glistening. He whispered under his breath, She's going to do it. She's not asking, she's demanding life for him." The girl tilted her head toward Buddy, brushing back the damp strands of hair stuck to his fur. I can't wait. If he leaves here without me, I don't know what I'll do. I need him to help my dad. And maybe he can help me too." Lisa's heart constricted. The shelter's policies, the rules about payment and medical holds, the paperwork, it all felt suddenly insignificant. But she knew she couldn't simply bend the rules without some accountability. Yet the girl's earnest eyes and quiet bravery made the decision unbearable. Buddy lifted his head slightly, whining softly. It wasn't a bark of fear, it was a plea. A connection forming, fragile but undeniable. Lisa reached out and patted the dog gently. "Sweetheart," she said, voice trembling, "this isn't easy. He's sick. He's been hurt. He may not be simple." The girl shook her head firmly, her eyes blazing with quiet fire. "I don't care. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll learn. I'll make him better. I'll help my dad. I can't lose him. Not now." A hush settled over the room. Even the other volunteers, seasoned in years of heartbreaks and abandoned animals, felt the tension tighten like a vice. There was bravery here that transcended age, a child willing to risk disappointment, pain, exhaustion, and heartbreak, all for a dog who had already given up on life. Lisa took a step back, exhaling slowly. She wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do, but her heart refused to ignore the plea before her. Policies were written in ink, but sometimes life demanded exceptions. And sometimes exceptions saved more than just a single life. They saved hearts, souls, and connections that had been lost to the world. The little girl's voice dropped to a whisper, almost too quiet to hear. Please let me take him today. I'll pay later, I swear. I need him to help my dad. I need him to help me, please." Buddy shifted in her arms, his small body trembling less now, responding to her heartbeat. He rested his head on her shoulder, eyes blinking slowly. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, he didn't seem entirely broken. Lisa glanced at the other volunteers. One nodded slightly, another wiped a tear from her cheek. They knew what was happening. Rules might bend today. Compassion had arrived and it demanded action. But even as the possibility of hope flickered in the room, a creeping unease set in. What if the girl couldn't handle it? What if Buddy's condition worsened? What if the heartbreak that had already touched so many hands returned to crush them again? Lisa swallowed hard, glancing at the clock. Closing time was approaching. Procedures had to be followed. Payments had to be made. But no one wanted to speak, fearing the moment would shatter if words were chosen poorly. The girl noticed the tension, sensing the unspoken doubts. She hugged Buddy tighter, whispering, "It's okay, we'll figure it out. I won't let anything happen to you, I promise." Buddy lifted his paw, weak but insistent, and rested it against her shoulder. It was a small, almost invisible gesture, yet it said everything. They understood each other. Two broken hearts finding solace in one fragile connection. Lisa sighed, finally speaking. I don't know how we can make this work," she admitted, voice catching. "But there's something in you, something I haven't seen before, and maybe he deserves that chance." The little girl's eyes filled with cautious hope. She had waited for this moment. She had dreamed of it countless nights, imagining a way to save a father's heart and a dog's life in one act of courage. But even as she smiled, a new worry crept in. The shelter had bills to pay, medications for Buddy that were expensive, and a clock that refused to stop ticking. Could she really provide what Buddy needed? Could she fulfill her promise to her dad? The room was thick with anticipation. Everyone could feel it, the fragile, trembling hope, the tension of what was at stake. And then Buddy let out a small, plaintive bark, soft but urgent, almost as if he were reminding them all. Time was running out. Lisa met the girl's gaze once more. "Okay," she whispered, almost to herself. "Let's see if we can make this work, but you have to promise me something." The girl nodded immediately, determination blazing. "Anything." "You have to promise to never give up," Lisa said. "Not on him, not on yourself, not on your dad." The girl's grip tightened around Buddy. "I promise," she said. And just like that, the room felt suspended in the quiet tension of possibility. Two lives, broken and battered, were about to be set on a path neither of them had imagined, one that could heal or one that could shatter completely. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, light mist curling against the windows. Inside, every breath seemed heavier, more charged with emotion. Volunteers and staff held their collective breath, waiting to see if hope would survive the next hour, waiting to see if the girl's brave heart could meet the world's harsh realities. And in that silence, Buddy let out another weak whine, resting his head on her shoulder. It was almost a question, almost a plea. Will she really save me? Will she be enough? The girl tightened her arms around him, whispering, "I'll try. I'll never stop trying." The room exhaled quietly, though none of them realized it. And somewhere deep inside, everyone knew, the next few minutes would determine everything. Because when the smallest voice carries the weight of so much love, the world has no choice but to listen. The little girl held Buddy tightly, her arms wrapped around his fragile body as though she could shield him from every hurt he had ever known. His head rested against her shoulder, warm and trembling, and for a moment the shelter seemed to exist in a bubble outside time, a fragile, suspended world where nothing mattered except hope, trust, and unspoken promises. Lisa stepped back, taking a deep breath. Rules, regulations, policies, they were written in ink and reinforced by years of procedures. No dog left the shelter without payment, no matter how compelling the story, no matter how urgent the need. Medical holds existed for a reason: medication, vet visits, follow-up care. And Buddy's history was complicated. He required more than the average adopter could provide. Yet here was a child, soaked from the rain, eyes bright with determination, willing to risk everything for a dog no one else wanted. Lisa felt her chest tighten. She glanced around the room. Volunteers lingered at a distance, hesitant to intervene but unable to look away. Marcus, the young man who had observed the girl's connection with Buddy from the start, whispered, She's serious. Look at her. She's ready." Lisa forced herself to focus on policy. "Rules exist for a reason," she murmured almost to herself. She turned to the girl, trying to sound firm. "Honey, I can't just let you take him home without payment. We have responsibilities here. Medication, vet bills. It's not just about taking him. It's about caring for him. Do you understand?" The girl looked up, eyes steady and unwavering despite the tension in the room. "I understand," she said softly. "I know it won't be easy, but I'll do whatever it takes. I can't let him leave without me." Lisa swallowed, torn. She glanced at Buddy, who had lifted his head and was now sniffing at the girl's hair, his eyes brightening just slightly. Something in him recognized what was unfolding, some flicker of hope he hadn't felt in weeks. The clock on the wall ticked mercilessly. Closing time was approaching. Paperwork needed signing, and the shelter's rules were non-negotiable. Yet the emotional weight in the room was undeniable. Volunteers whispered quietly among themselves, unsure how to proceed. "I've never seen this," Marcus said under his breath. "A kid so small and so determined, and he's responding to her. It's like magic." Lisa shook her head. Magic didn't exist in shelters, only protocols, schedules, and the harsh reality that some animals didn't make it. And Buddy had already been through enough to prove that point. She looked at the girl again. Her hands were trembling slightly as she held Buddy closer, but there was fire in her eyes, fire she couldn't ignore. The girl leaned in, brushing her cheek against Buddy. "Please," she whispered. "I'll do everything, I promise." Lisa sighed heavily, caught between her duty and her heart. She knelt to meet the girl's gaze. "I need to know if he gets worse, if he struggles, if he's sick. Can you handle it? Can you promise to not give up?" The girl didn't hesitate. "I promise," she said firmly. Her voice carried the weight of years she hadn't lived yet, determination and innocence intertwined. Buddy let out a low whine, his tail giving a faint, hesitant wag. He leaned further into her embrace. Volunteers exchanged glances, realizing that the connection between the girl and the dog was more than fleeting. It was a lifeline. Yet Lisa knew the reality. Exceptions could backfire. She could bend the rules, let the girl take Buddy home, but what if she wasn't enough? What if he needed more than she could give? And worse, what if this fragile hope shattered in the next days? Marcus leaned closer to her, whispering, "Sometimes the heart knows what rules can't dictate." Lisa swallowed hard. She looked at the girl, then at Buddy, and finally at the other volunteers, who now surrounded the scene, torn between admiration and fear. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her like a physical force. One decision could save 2 lives or break them irreparably. The little girl, sensing the hesitation, tightened her arms around Buddy. "I'll do it," she whispered again. "I'll try. I won't give up, I promise." And then Buddy shifted in her arms, a soft bark escaping him, weak but insistent. It was a sound that seemed to echo in the empty shelter, demanding attention, demanding action. He wasn't just a dog, he was a plea, a living testament to the fragile hope that this child carried. Lisa's eyes filled with tears. She stepped back, realizing that policies, rules, and schedules meant nothing compared to the raw, honest connection unfolding before her. Yet even as her heart urged her to act, the practicalities loomed. Medications, vet bills, follow-ups. Could a child manage all that? Could she protect both herself and Buddy from the heartbreak that often accompanied sick, returned animals? The girl noticed the tension, sensing the unspoken doubts. She brushed a damp strand of hair from Buddy's eyes. "We'll figure it out," she whispered, voice trembling but resolute. "I won't let anything happen to you. I promise." Buddy rested his head on her shoulder, closing his eyes briefly. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, he seemed calm, trusting. The shelter staff watched silently, their own hearts caught between admiration and fear. The clock ticked louder now, reminding them that time was running out. Closing was imminent. Protocols demanded adherence. Payment was required. Yet no one could tear their eyes away from the scene in the corner. A girl and a dog, both fragile, both desperate, both determined to survive the day together. Lisa's hands shook slightly as she reached for her phone. She needed guidance. She needed someone to authorize an exception to allow this small miracle to take place without violating policy. She dialed quickly, voice low, explaining the situation. The words poured out in a mixture of urgency and hope, and as she spoke, the girl held Buddy even closer, whispering softly, "It's okay. We'll be okay." The other volunteers shifted nervously. They wanted to help but were unsure how to bend the rules without consequences. Yet, watching the girl, seeing Buddy respond to her presence, they realized that some moments demanded courage beyond policy. The little girl's voice, quiet but unwavering, finally cut through the tension. "Please, just this once. Please let me help him. Please let me try." The room seemed to hold its breath. Outside, the drizzle had returned, mist curling against the windows. Inside, the weight of hope, desperation, and raw emotion pressed down on everyone. No one moved. No one spoke. They waited, suspended between rules and the undeniable truth that sometimes compassion had to win. And just as Lisa felt the first glimmer of resolve, just as she was about to announce that she would make an exception, there was a knock at the door. All heads turned. The sound, sudden and sharp in the quiet room, sent a shiver through the air. Volunteers froze, the little girl clinging tighter to Buddy. The dog lifted his head, ears pricked, sensing the arrival of something unknown. Lisa stepped forward, heart pounding. She opened the door slightly, peering out, and saw a figure standing in the misty drizzle. A stranger, silhouetted by the pale light outside, holding something in their hands. The girl whispered, almost to herself, Who is that?" Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. The decision she had been wrestling with, the bending of rules for compassion, was about to face a test she hadn't anticipated. And as the stranger stepped closer, the weight of uncertainty, fear, and suspense settled over the room like a storm cloud. No one knew what would happen next. The knock on the door had shattered the fragile bubble of quiet in the shelter, and every head turned. Outside, the drizzle clung to the edges of the glass, mist curling like ghostly fingers against the dim glow of streetlights. The little girl tightened her arms around Buddy, whose trembling had returned, now tinged with uncertainty. His eyes, once clouded and weary, darted toward the door, alert and uneasy. Something about the figure waiting outside made even the seasoned volunteers pause. Lisa stepped forward cautiously, holding the door slightly ajar. The figure came into view, a man, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a soaked jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. His hands held something, a small envelope, a bag, and a wallet clutched tightly as if it contained a lifeline. Behind him, the street was empty, rain-slicked, glowing under the dull street lamps. "Can I help you?" Lisa asked, her voice careful, steadying herself against the wave of tension in the room. The man looked at her, eyes soft but determined. I heard about the dog," he said, voice quiet but earnest. "I don't know much, but I want to help. I don't want him to leave, not like that." The volunteers exchanged bewildered glances. No one had expected an outside party. The shelter rarely saw strangers step in with such urgency, especially for a dog labeled too sick to care for. The little girl's eyes widened, a mixture of hope and disbelief. Lisa hesitated, torn between caution and the sense of momentum shifting. Who sent you?" she asked. "No one," the man admitted. I overheard from the street, saw her come in, I couldn't leave. I know what it's like to lose someone you love and a dog you cared for. I want to help her." Marcus leaned closer to Lisa, whispering, "She's not dreaming. Someone really came. This could be it." The girl's grip on Buddy tightened as she whispered, He's here to help us." The man nodded, shifting the bag in his hands. "I can cover some of the costs," he said. "I don't know how much you need, but I want him to go home today, with her." Lisa's heart skipped. It wasn't the full payment, but it was a start. She glanced at the little girl, who now sat cross-legged on the floor with Buddy in her lap, holding him close as though shielding him from a world that had already taken too much. "Thank you," the girl whispered, voice shaking. "Thank you so much. I promise I'll pay the rest. I'll work and save and—" The man shook his head. "No promises needed right now. Just get him home. That's all that matters." For a moment the shelter seemed suspended in a quiet miracle. Volunteers and staff, seasoned in years of heartbreak and returned animals, exchanged stunned looks. Policies, paperwork, rules, they all seemed to melt away in the face of pure, unselfish action. But reality soon crept back in. Buddy's medical needs, the remaining balance, the closing time, everything pressed against them like a tide ready to pull back. Lisa exhaled, realizing the clock was still ticking. The shelter would close in less than 30 minutes. Every second mattered. The little girl looked at Lisa, eyes wide, unwavering. Can we do it? Can I take him home today?" Lisa nodded slowly. "We'll make it work," she said, trying to steady her voice. "But you have to promise me something." "Anything?" the girl whispered. "You have to promise," Lisa said, her hands gripping Buddy's cage as if anchoring herself to the moment, "that you'll never give up on him. No matter what happens. If he struggles, if he gets sick, you keep fighting. Do you understand?" The girl nodded immediately. "I promise I'll never give up. I won't let anything happen to him, not ever." Buddy let out a small, hoarse bark, pressing his head against her shoulder. It was a sound of trust, a sound that told everyone in the room, "We belong together." The man from outside stepped forward, handing over the envelope, the wallet, and the small bag of coins he had carried through the rain. "This will cover most of it," he said. "The rest, she'll figure it out. She has to, but right now he goes home." Marcus shook his head in disbelief. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "I've never seen anything like this." The girl's lips trembled. She took the envelope, fingers brushing against the man. "Thank you," she said, voice breaking. I don't even know how to say." "Just take care of him," the man interrupted softly. "That's all that matters." Lisa began gathering the necessary paperwork, filling out forms with hands that shook slightly from the emotional weight of the day. Volunteers scurried to prepare Buddy's medications, wrap him in a soft blanket, and prepare him for the journey to a new home. Buddy, sensing the shift, leaned into the girl, tail wagging just enough to signal a flicker of hope. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he trusted her. And for a dog who had seen abandonment twice, that trust was monumental. The little girl whispered to him, brushing damp strands of hair from his eyes. "We're going home," she said softly. "We're going to fix everything, you'll see. We'll make it better." But even as the room buzzed with quiet activity, an undercurrent of tension remained. There were still unanswered questions. Could she truly handle the responsibility of Buddy's care? Would her father respond the way she hoped? Could this fragile hope withstand the realities of medicine, schedules, and life beyond the shelter walls? The man from outside lingered near the door, watching silently. There was a heaviness in the air, an understanding that the next few hours would determine whether a child and a dog could survive the challenges ahead. Lisa handed the girl a small sheet with instructions for Buddy's medication. "Follow these exactly," she said, voice soft but firm. "It's critical, and take him home. But remember what I said, never give up." The girl nodded, clutching the papers as if they were treasure. Buddy pressed his nose against her cheek, whimpering softly. It was as if he understood the gravity of the moment, as if he were asking for reassurance that the promises being made wouldn't be broken. The volunteers moved aside, allowing the little girl and Buddy to pass. Outside, the drizzle had stopped, leaving the world glistening with wet streets and reflections of streetlights. The city felt surreal, almost magical, as she stepped out of the shelter with Buddy in her arms. And then, just as the door was about to close behind her, the little girl paused, glancing back over her shoulder. Her voice was barely a whisper carried on the night air. "Thank you for believing in us." Inside, the shelter staff and volunteers remained silent for a moment, hearts pounding, tears welling in eyes too long accustomed to disappointment. Marcus shook his head, muttering, "I don't think I've ever seen a miracle like that, ever." But the moment of relief was fleeting. The little girl's journey was just beginning. Buddy was frail, his health uncertain, and the weight of responsibility pressing on her small shoulders would not be light. As they walked down the wet street, the girl glanced at Buddy, who lifted his head and sniffed the night air. His paw brushed hers, a soft touch that sent shivers down her spine. They were two lives intertwined, fragile and broken in different ways, now bound together by trust and hope. And yet, as the streetlights flickered above them, she knew the real challenge was just beginning. The fight to save a father, a dog, and herself would be long, hard, and uncertain. But for the first time, she felt that maybe, just maybe, they could survive it together. Because sometimes, miracles aren't about what the world can give. They're about what the bravest hearts refuse to let go. And as Buddy let out a soft, steady bark, almost as if signaling his own determination, the little girl whispered, "We're just getting started." Little girl clutched Buddy close as they stepped out of the shelter into the damp night. Streetlights reflected off the wet pavement, casting a golden haze that shimmered like a dream or a promise. Buddy rested his head against her shoulder, trembling slightly, but there was a flicker of strength in his eyes. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, he seemed to sense safety. Yet even as relief washed over her, reality pressed down like a heavy stone. The envelope the stranger had handed over covered most of Buddy's adoption and medical costs, but not all. There was still a gap, an impossible gap for an 8-year-old carrying a handful of coins she had been saving for months. She counted them over and over, hoping the clinking pile could somehow stretch further. It couldn't. Her heart pounded in her chest. She whispered to Buddy, I'll pay the rest, I promise. I just need to get you home." Buddy's paw nudged her gently, almost as if he understood her struggle, almost as if he were saying, "We can figure it out." The streets were quiet except for the distant hum of a late-night car and the occasional drip of water from the eaves. Every step toward home felt heavy, laden with responsibility she wasn't sure she was ready for. Her hoodie clung to her skin, damp from the rain, but she didn't care. Buddy's warmth against her chest was all that mattered. She thought of her dad, lying upstairs, silent, his eyes hollow from months of sadness. She imagined placing Buddy beside him, watching him lift his head, maybe even smile. The thought made her fingers tighten around Buddy's fur, but the gap in payment lingered like a shadow, a constant reminder that hope often comes with obstacles. Back at the shelter, Lisa and the volunteers had double-checked the paperwork, making sure everything was in order. They had seen many miracles fail, children overwhelmed by responsibility, animals who couldn't adjust, promises broken by circumstance. Yet somehow, this little girl's determination radiated in a way that made their doubts falter. Still, the remaining balance loomed unresolved. The girl arrived at her modest home, the front porch slick with leftover rainwater. She paused, her small hands gripping Buddy tightly. She had no idea how she would cover the remaining costs. The coins in her pocket seemed laughably insufficient compared to the bills she knew awaited: special food, medication, vet visits. She could feel Buddy's weight pressing against her, a warm, fragile reminder of the life she had promised to protect. She stepped inside, heart pounding. The faint smell of her father's solitude lingered in the living room, a mixture of old cologne, worn blankets, and unwashed dishes. Upstairs, she knew he lay in bed, silent and withdrawn. She whispered, "Daddy, I have someone for you," her voice small, trembling but resolute. Buddy nuzzled closer, sensing her anxiety, offering comfort where he could. Her father stirred faintly at the sound of her voice. He didn't rise, didn't speak. He barely opened his eyes. The weight of his depression had made him nearly invisible to the world, yet the little girl pressed forward, clutching Buddy like a shield against despair. She led Buddy gently to the foot of the stairs, careful not to jostle his fragile body. Upstairs, the father stirred again. He muttered something incoherent, a sound caught between a sigh and a moan. The girl's heart ached, but she knew she couldn't give up, not now. She whispered, "He's here to help you, Daddy. He's going to stay with us." Buddy barked softly, low and hesitant, almost a reassurance. The father's eyes flickered open, just enough to catch sight of the dog. For a moment the room felt suspended in silence. Then, unexpectedly, he shifted, moving slightly in bed. It wasn't much, but it was enough, a sign of life returning to a soul that had nearly gone dark. The girl's heart soared, but the weight of responsibility pressed harder. The remaining medical bills and adoption costs loomed, an impossible mountain for someone her age. She counted the coins again, then sat on the edge of the bed, hugging Buddy, tears spilling freely. "I'll figure it out," she whispered. "I have to, I promised." Outside, the night seemed to stretch endlessly, quiet and still, as if waiting. Inside, she made a plan, extra chores, small jobs for neighbors, anything to make up the gap. But even as she resolved to act, doubt crept in. Could she really manage Buddy's care? Could she truly help her father heal, even a little? The weight of it pressed down on her, threatening to break the fragile hope she clutched so tightly. Then, as if the universe had heard her silent plea, a soft knock came at the door. Her heart leapt. Who could it be at this hour? She opened the door cautiously, and there, standing in the faint glow of the porch light, was the elderly woman from the street, the stranger who had helped at the shelter. Her coat was damp from the rain, but her eyes were warm, determined. In her hands she held a small envelope, neatly sealed. "I heard there was still a gap," the woman said softly. "I can help cover the rest. This little guy deserves a chance." The girl's mouth fell open, tears streamed down her face. You're helping us," she whispered, voice cracking. The woman smiled gently. "Sometimes people need a little help to give the bravest hearts a chance. He's yours now, just take care of him." Buddy barked softly, nuzzling into the girl's arms, sensing the generosity and kindness radiating from the woman. The impossible gap had been bridged. For the first time that night, the little girl could breathe without fear. Yet even as relief washed over her, a new tension crept in. Buddy was still weak. Her father's depression was still profound. The journey to heal both would be long, grueling, and uncertain. Every coin, every promise, every small act of care mattered more than ever. She clutched Buddy to her chest, whispering, "We can do this. I know we can." Buddy rested his head against hers, letting out a soft whine, almost a promise in return. They were partners now, bound by trust and love, facing the uncertainty together. The elderly woman smiled once more and left, disappearing into the night. The girl closed the door behind her, leaning against it as tears continued to fall. She knew the fight was far from over, but the first, crucial battle had been won. And upstairs, her father shifted slightly, letting his hand brush against the dog's fur. The faintest glimmer of recognition, of connection, sparked in his eyes. The little girl clutched Buddy tighter, feeling the fragile thread of hope beginning to stretch into something real. But even in this small moment of victory, the night whispered its warnings. Challenges lay ahead, obstacles waiting, and the fragile promise of healing had only just begun. The next hours, days, and weeks would test the courage of a little girl, a returned dog, and a father on the edge of despair. Outside, the street was silent, mist curling against the wet pavement. Inside, a small pair of hands held a fragile dog, and a flicker of hope, whispering promises of love and determination against the vast uncertainty that lay ahead. And as the girl looked at Buddy, who blinked up at her with trust and newfound energy, she whispered, "We've got this, together." But in the quiet, lingering tension of the night, everyone, human and animal, sensed that the journey had only just begun. And the stakes were higher than they could yet understand. Morning broke slowly, light filtering through the thin curtains of the little girl's modest bedroom. Buddy lay curled against her chest, breathing steady but shallow, his thin frame a fragile bundle of fur and ribs. The night had been long, filled with quiet moments of worry, gentle reassurances, and whispered promises. She had fed him the first round of medicine, wrapped him in a warm blanket, and watched over him as he slept. Her hands were sore from holding him, but her heart swelled with determination. Her father, still in bed upstairs, had stirred slightly during the night, murmuring incoherently but not leaving his bed. She knew the road ahead would be difficult. He wouldn't heal overnight, and Buddy's health was precarious. But she refused to let despair touch this fragile moment. After breakfast, the girl laid out Buddy's schedule. She had studied the instructions Lisa had left carefully, memorizing each dosage, each feeding, and every sign of distress. She whispered softly to Buddy as she prepared his medicine, "We've got this, Buddy. You and me. We're going to get through this." Buddy responded with a weak but unmistakable nuzzle, resting his head on her shoulder. The clock ticked relentlessly. The first challenge came quickly, a sudden coughing fit from Buddy, sharp and unexpected. He whined, trembling violently, and the girl's hands shook as she steadied him. Her father, now sitting up slightly, glanced down from the stairs, concern flickering in his eyes. Is he okay?" he asked quietly, his voice hoarse from weeks of silence. The girl swallowed, voice firm despite the panic rising in her chest. "He'll be okay, Daddy. I promise. I've got him." She administered the medication carefully, whispering reassurances to Buddy as he quivered in her hands. Her father watched, silent and still, but she could see the faintest trace of awareness returning to him, his fingers twitching as if he wanted to help, to reach out but couldn't. By midday, the challenges multiplied. Buddy's appetite was weak and he refused much of the special food. She tried hand-feeding him, coaxing him gently, whispering encouragement, but each bite felt like a battle. She worked tirelessly, refusing to let frustration or exhaustion seep in. Every tremor of Buddy's body, every hesitant pause step, weighed heavily on her tiny shoulders. Her father remained mostly silent, watching from his bed, until finally he murmured, He reminds me of someone I used to know." The girl's heart leapt. "Really? Who, Daddy?" He shook his head slightly, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "No one just brings back memories." His voice was fragile, broken, but there was a spark, small, almost imperceptible, but it was there. The afternoon brought another test. Buddy collapsed briefly while trying to move toward the couch. Panic surged through the girl's chest. She grabbed a soft blanket, lifting him gently, murmuring every word she could think of. "It's okay. I'm here. I won't let anything happen, I promise. We'll get through this together." She carried him carefully, noticing how his breathing slowed slightly with the warmth of her arms. Her father, for the first time in weeks, rose from the bed, shakily reaching toward Buddy. The dog's ears perked, eyes widening as he recognized movement. With careful encouragement from the girl, Buddy allowed the father's hand to brush his fur. The room felt suspended, an unspoken connection forming between the three of them. Even as relief bloomed in her chest, another challenge arose. Buddy's medication required a precise dose, but she realized she had misread the instructions slightly, giving him too little for the first round. Panic threatened to overwhelm her. She bit her lip, tears pricking her eyes. I didn't mean to, Buddy. I didn't." Her father, now standing fully with trembling hands, guided her gently. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're trying, you're doing your best, that's what matters." The words steadied her, but the weight of responsibility remained heavy. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown, each second a test of courage and determination. She prepared the next round of medicine carefully, double-checking every measurement, whispering encouragement to Buddy all the while. By evening, exhaustion threatened to overtake her. Her small frame shook as she held Buddy, whose head rested wearily on her shoulder. Tears streaked down her cheeks, but she refused to let go. She whispered stories of brave dogs, of heroes who never gave up, hopping to infuse him with the courage he needed to survive. Her father, now sitting beside her on the couch, reached down and gently stroked Buddy's fur. You're amazing," he murmured. "All of you." His voice was raw, fragile, but there was warmth there, a hint of the man he had been before depression had claimed him. The room fell silent, save for the soft sound of Buddy's breathing and the faint hum of the heater. The little girl rested her cheek against his head, whispering, "We're not done yet. We'll keep going, no matter what." But just as the night seemed to settle, a sharp, urgent sound shattered the fragile calm. Buddy let out a sudden bark, weak but insistent, his body stiffening. The girl's heart leapt. She felt a tremor of fear. Something was wrong. She leaned closer, examining him, whispering urgently, "What is it, Buddy? What's wrong?" The dog trembled violently, pawing at the floor, whimpering as though warning her of impending danger. Her father moved closer, concern etched on his face. Is he sick?" he asked, voice tight. She shook her head, panic rising. "I don't know. I think maybe he needs the medicine again." Her small hands moved swiftly, retrieving the correct dosage from the instructions, administering it carefully while whispering reassurances to Buddy. The tension in the room was unbearable. Every second stretched painfully, each heartbeat a drum of suspense. Buddy's trembling slowed, but he remained weak, fragile, as though the slightest misstep could undo all their progress. The little girl's mind raced. Could she manage this? Could she continue to protect Buddy, her father, and herself from the weight of uncertainty pressing down on them all? Each success felt temporary, each moment of calm precarious. Her father watched silently, finally whispering, You're stronger than I thought, braver than anyone I've known." The girl's chest ached. She wanted to tell him it wasn't bravery, just love, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she whispered to Buddy, holding him closer, "We're almost there, Buddy, I promise. Just a little longer. We can do this together." Outside, the night pressed close, the wind rustling against the windows, the city quiet except for distant sirens. Inside, a fragile bond had been forged through fear, determination, and unrelenting love. The little girl, Buddy, and her father had survived the day, but the night still held uncertainty, challenges that could rise without warning. As she drifted into a tense vigil beside Buddy, she whispered softly, "We'll get through this. No matter what comes next, I promise." And in the silence, Buddy let out a soft whine, pressing his head against her shoulder once more, signaling the fragile hope that had carried them through. Yet the air held a tension that refused to dissipate, for even in moments of triumph, the path to survival and to healing remained uncertain. The final hurdle was still ahead. And as the girl held him, eyes heavy with exhaustion but full of resolve, the story waited on the precipice of revelation. The moment that would define their future, the climax that would test whether love, courage, and determination could truly overcome a world that had been cruel to both of them. Morning sunlight spilled through the thin curtains of the little girl's bedroom, casting a warm, golden glow over Buddy and her father. For the first time in weeks, the room felt alive, not just with movement but with possibility. Buddy stirred in her arms, lifting his head and blinking up at her with eyes that had begun to regain their sparkle. The trembling that had haunted him the night before was now almost gone, replaced by a tentative strength that mirrored the resilience growing inside the little girl. Her father sat up in bed, leaning on one elbow, his gaze following the small, courageous duo. He reached out a shaky hand, almost fearful of breaking the fragile bond forming in the room, and rested it gently on Buddy's back. The dog stiffened slightly, then relaxed as if recognizing a promise of safety in this hesitant touch. The father's eyes softened. For the first time in months, they held more than sadness. They held the beginnings of hope. The little girl's chest swelled with emotion. Tears streamed freely, but she didn't try to stop them. "See, Buddy," she whispered, stroking his fur, "we can do this. We're going to get better together. Daddy, he's finally seeing it too." Buddy barked softly, a quiet, encouraging sound as if he understood the gravity of the moment. Breakfast was tentative but filled with warmth. The father accepted food for the first time in days, moving slowly but intentionally, encouraged by the presence of Buddy at his side. The little girl helped, holding Buddy gently while offering her father small bites. Each bite seemed to spark recognition, a flicker of connection returning to a man who had been buried in the weight of despair. The morning passed in quiet vigilance, the girl monitoring Buddy's health carefully, administering medicine on schedule, watching his breathing, checking for any signs of distress. She whispered reassurances constantly, her voice steady despite exhaustion. Her father, now sitting beside her on the couch, watched, his hand resting lightly on Buddy's fur, a connection that had been impossible weeks before. As afternoon approached, the girl led Buddy outside to the small yard, allowing him to stretch his legs for the first time. His steps were tentative at first, unsure of the world after so much trauma, but he gradually gained confidence, moving with a grace that surprised even the girl. She laughed softly, a sound that had been absent in the house for too long, and Buddy responded with a wag of his tail, soft but unmistakable. Her father stepped outside to watch, leaning on the porch railing, a faint smile tugging at his lips. The girl's heart leapt. She had been afraid he would remain trapped in the darkness, but here he was, present, watching, engaging, even smiling. "It's nice," he murmured. I forgot what this felt like." The girl's eyes filled with tears and she hugged Buddy close. "We'll make it better," she said softly. "All of us, together, I promise." The next week became a delicate balance of care, patience, and determination. The girl rose early, preparing Buddy's meals and medication, encouraging her father to join in small ways. Slowly, the father began to respond. He fed Buddy, even tossing a ball gently across the living room floor to watch the dog chase it. Each small interaction brought him back to life in ways he hadn't realized he needed. Buddy, too, thrived under the girl's unwavering care. His ribs filled out, his fur grew shinier, and the faint glimmer of his once dim eyes grew brighter every day. He learned to trust again, to enjoy play, to seek affection, and most importantly, to give it back. The bond between him and the little girl strengthened with every passing moment, their lives intertwined in a way that words could barely capture. One afternoon, the father reached for a leash, holding it uncertainly. I think we should take him for a walk," he said, voice hesitant but firm. The girl's eyes widened in disbelief and joy. "You mean it?" she asked, barely able to contain her excitement. He nodded. I want to try with him with us." The walk was tentative at first. Buddy hesitated at the edge of the yard, sniffing, ears alert. But the girl held his paw lightly, guiding him, while her father followed closely, a hand brushing the leash as though reconnecting with life itself. Step by step, they moved through the neighborhood, drawing quiet stares from neighbors who had long assumed the family was lost to hardship. With every step, laughter returned, soft, fragile, but unmistakable. The little girl skipped beside Buddy, guiding him along the sidewalk while her father followed, a presence growing stronger, more aware. The world, once muted by despair, felt alive again. Then a neighbor approached, stopping in surprise. Is that him?" they asked, pointing to Buddy. I thought he was gone." The girl nodded, voice proud and steady. "He's here, he's home. We're okay now." Buddy barked softly, wagging his tail in agreement as if to confirm every word. Even as joy filled the scene, there remained a lingering tension, reminders that life was fragile and that healing required constant vigilance. The little girl knew this. She understood that each day was a test, a choice to act with love and courage. But for the first time, she believed they could face it together. That evening, after a long day of care, the father sat on the couch, Buddy resting his head in his lap. The little girl curled beside them, exhausted but radiant. "Thank you," the father whispered, voice choked with emotion. You saved him. You saved me too." The girl hugged Buddy tightly, tears streaming down her face. "We saved each other," she said softly. "All of us, together." Buddy nudged her gently, as if in agreement, tail wagging weakly but steadily. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the quiet neighborhood. The world had not changed, but inside the little home, everything had. Love, determination and courage had stitched together broken lives, forming a fragile but unbreakable bond between girl, dog, and father. The days that followed were filled with small victories, Buddy running with joy, the father eating and laughing, the girl learning more about resilience than any classroom could teach. They faced setbacks, of course, moments of illness, fatigue, and doubt, but each time they overcame them together. The weight of despair that had once pressed down on the house began to lift, replaced by the quiet, steady rhythm of healing. One night, as the family sat together on the couch, Buddy curled between them, the little girl whispered, "We did it, Buddy. We really did it." Buddy barked softly, pressing his head against her shoulder. Her father reached over, stroking her hair, and said, "We did it because of you, because of your heart." Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief and love she felt. She had fought for a dog, for her father, for herself, and in the process, they had all been saved. The story of their struggle spread quietly through the neighborhood, neighbors marveling at the courage and resilience of the little girl who refused to let despair win. Buddy became a symbol of hope, a living reminder that even in the darkest times, love and determination could restore life and hearts. And though challenges remained, the family now faced them together, no longer alone. Every bark, every wag, every small act of care was a promise kept, a life redeemed. As night fell and the stars began to twinkle over the quiet neighborhood, the little girl held Buddy close, her father beside her, and whispered into the soft, peaceful silence, "We're okay now. We'll be okay. Together always." Buddy lifted his head, blinking at her with eyes full of trust, and let out a small, contented bark, as if confirming that this time love had truly won. And for the first time in a long, long while, the little girl believed it too.